I died. I'm not competitive about sports at all, but I'm pretty competitive about Scrabble. Hey and welcome, I'm Doris Weiger, and today I am sitting on my porch because my lilac bush is blooming and it smells amazing out here, and there's bird song everywhere, so hopefully you can hear that. And the lighting is just like, it just feels so good to be outside. I'm in my Pemberley sweatshirt. So I was not planning on posting a May TBR because like I never end up following TBRs and then I feel like weird and bad and guilty. And then Cindy came along with the Asian Readathon, which is done for the past several years, and I realized that I've not read a lot of books by Asian authors this year, and I want to fix that, and now is a fantastic time to fix that. And I was watching her video thinking like, okay, I might read a couple Asian books, and then she said one of the prompts is to read a book either with a female main character or a person, an older person, as the protagonist, because there's not a lot of older people protagonists in books and in movies. And then she gave an example.
For example, I recently read Convenience Store Women, which is a novella featuring a woman in her 30s. Being 36 isn't necessarily old, however...
I died. I am turning 40 next month. 37 is not as so... So I went looking for books written by Asian authors in the genres that I like of mystery, thriller, and crime. And there are not that many Asian female main characters over 40 in that genre that I could find. Now, I'm gonna start this out by saying, please send me your recommendations. Like, I'm not saying I know everything or even some things. I need your recommendations for this, okay? Before we even get into the book recommendations, and if you think it's important to read from a diversity of voices, it's also important to watch a diversity of voices, real people in real life, not just fictional people who are from other backgrounds. So I've included a list, I think of 9 or 10 booktubers below who are Asian themselves and doing a video on Asian book recommendations. Obviously, they all talk about so many other things outside of their Asian identity, but since we're all looking for books to read for the Asian Readathon, I thought that would be a great place to go. I'm going to include those links below. Please go watch them, like them, subscribe to them. They're all fantastic and wonderful people I subscribe to. So before we get into what I'm going to read, I was going through my Goodreads and looking for books that I've read written by Asian authors that feature especially a woman over age 40, because I'm not counting over 30 as an older main character, or else I might just have like a total breakdown. The first one that came to mind is a total classic. I think I read it back in college, and that is The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan. So this is really a story, as much as I remember, of mothers and daughters. So you see the daughters of the Joy Luck Club. It's like a club of women that get together and play a game, and they're older, and how their daughters feel about, I think all the older women immigrated to America. You get both perspectives. Another book that I absolutely loved that had an older character is Mike Chen's Here and Now and Then. This book was so much fun. It's a time travel book. A father actually travels back and forth in time, and he gets stuck like back in the 90s and has a family, and then he gets thrown back into his real life. And so of course his daughter is older, and I'm not sure how old the main character is supposed to be, but because he's a father of eventually a teenager, even though he's a time traveler, he definitely feels like a character who is in his late 30s or 40s. I looked online and I couldn't like find his age anywhere. Another book with fabulous older Asian women written by an Asian author is Dial A for Aunties. This has a younger woman who gets into some trouble, and her aunties and mom come and help her out. And I think her mom is one of 4 sisters. There's a whole posse of older women in her life that are, they all have their own personalities and styles, and they're all telling her what she should do, and she's also trying to protect them. So the second book in the series is actually just out like this week that you watch this. So I haven't read it yet, but it is 4 Aunties and a Wedding, and I have requested it from my library, so that is on my TBR. Now, just for some general recommendations of books that I've loved that would fulfill some of the prompts for the Asian Readathon. The first one is The Farm by Joanna Ramos. She's a Filipino author. The Farm by Joanna Ramos is a kind of dystopian, psychological, maybe a little sci-fi thriller, and it's about a beautiful retreat in the Hudson Valley where you get to eat organic food and be completely pampered, and there's a beautiful spa, but the catch is they monitor everything you do, and you're there to be a surrogate of a baby for a super wealthy couple. And the main character is a recent immigrant from the Philippines. She's struggling to make ends meet, so she agrees to go there on like a recommendation of one of her friends, and she becomes very concerned about what's happening there. It is creepy, it is like scary, it is so good, and I really, really enjoyed it. Ooh, if you're looking for another cozy mystery, Vivian Chen's Death by Dumpling series, I think it's called the Noodle Shop Mysteries is the like series name. They are cute and fun, and the main character is actually a single woman, I think in her 30s, and her family thinks she's too old and she should have been married already. And of course she has a little romance storyline, but what I like about the Noodle Shop Mysteries more than other cozies I've read is that it's not overly twee. It's not too cutesy. There is real trouble. She's able to do the amateur sleuthing because of her relationships within her community of other people who work like in the shopping center where her noodle shop is. And because she's built these relationships, like people open up and they also listen and they're kind of gossipy, and it was fun and it was fast paced. I find some cozies get really bogged down in like the descriptions of place. This I think is set in Cleveland, Ohio. It's not really set in like a tiny small town, but it is set in a more insular community where she knows everybody and they're supportive, and then there are also some, you know, rude people and some sketchy businessmen, and it's just really fun. So that is the Noodle Shop Mysteries by Vivian Chen. And my last recommendation is actually a nonfiction book. It's a memoir I read when I was reading a lot about adoption, and it's a story, it's written by Nicole Chung, who was placed for adoption by her Korean parents, and she was adopted by a white family in Oregon and was raised in a very white neighborhood and community, and she is looking for, she spent her life looking for her Asian American identity, and then when she gets pregnant with her children, she realizes this will be her first blood relative, and she'll need to teach her children how to operate in the world as Asian Americans, and she goes looking for more of her own story. And I love to read adult adoptees stories and memoirs and essays because it helps me as an adoptive parent understand what my kids might be thinking. None of my kids are transracially adopted, but there's a layer in this book of being adoptee and then also being transracially adopted, and it is so good and it is so beautiful, and I cried my eyes out. It's beautifully written. That's Nicole Chung's All You Can Ever Know. It is so good. So I have a couple books that I actually have that I know I'm going to be able to read, and then I have 3 books that I really want to read and I've requested from my library, but my library doesn't actually even own 2 of them, so I've requested that they buy them. I'm also going to go to the used bookstore and check it out there. So the first one I've actually already started and I took a little break from because it is extremely intense. It's nonfiction, it's a new release. It's called What My Bones Know by Stephanie Fu. Now, trigger warnings for all the triggers. This is a book about complex PTSD, or the kind of mental health issues of having PTSD that occurred because of multiple recurring events in your childhood. That's the very popular book, The Body Keeps the Score, is also about that issue, the issue of complex PTSD, but whereas that one is written by a researcher who's really studying it and talking about his findings, this is written by somebody who experienced severe childhood physical and emotional abuse and shares that in the first few chapters, very specific stories of her childhood that she remembers, and then talks about realizing like what then she was like in the world as an adult growing up, and how she eventually gets her diagnosis and realizes the ways that this has shaped her, and just the the chapter in which she recognizes that all of the personality traits that they say go along with complex PTSD perfectly align with her personality, and she wonders how much of her personality is actually her and how much of it is this mental health issue, how much of it is the trauma that she went through. It really spoke to me. I think many people who get a diagnosis like CPTSD or ADHD or anxiety or depression, many of us go through a period of wondering how much of this is who I really would be, who I really am on the inside, and how much of this is just reactions to trauma, just the ways that our brain are wired differently, like just the diagnosis versus me. And so that chapter was extremely powerful. Like I said, I've taken a break for a few days, in part because I knew I was going to read this in May and I didn't want to finish it before the beginning of May. And in part because it's really intense and I'm kind of reading it slowly. Otherwise, it's too intense. I don't think the whole thing is going to be intense. I think it's already getting a lot more academic and more about what she's learning. It's about her journey of recovery. So it's not just one of those books that's about a bunch of bad things that happened to somebody. I highly recommend it. If you experience childhood trauma, if you liked my videos about ACE scores, which I will link up below, or I will link up here, like the book The Deepest Well, I highly recommend you read that one as well. Also written by a doctor and researcher. I really think you're going to want to read this memoir to help you not feel so alone. So that is What My Bones Know by Stephanie Fu. So good. So next on my reading list is The Woman in the Library. Now I actually have a advanced reader copy of this, so I'm going to read it on my Kindle. So thank you to the publisher for that free copy. It is written by Sulari Gentill, who is an Australian who is from Sri Lanka. And in the story, there are a group of people in a quiet study room in the Boston Public Library, and the silence is shattered when they hear a scream. I think that's how the description put it. And the police come running in, they make everybody stay put, and so the people in the room all talk to each other and get to know each other, but of course people are hiding things, and we are unraveling the mystery of what actually happened, and does anybody in this room know anything? I haven't read much more of the description than that. I haven't looked at any reviews. I don't know anything else about it, and I like to keep it that way for a mystery. I am super looking forward to that book, so I'm gonna read that like very next. The next book I know I'm gonna read, because I actually have it, is IQ by Joe Ide. Joe Ide is a Japanese American author, and IQ and the series of books, actually there are several books and I have the first two. I follow Isaiah Quintabi, who is a Black man who lives in East Long Beach, like LA, and the police aren't doing enough to take care of his community, so he begins to do things that the police might usually do, like look for missing kids, solve disputes, stuff like that, kind of like a private investigator, I guess, but he offers people a sliding scale of payment, and each book follows a different mystery that he's trying to solve. In this one, a rap mogul goes missing and he's been hired to find the rap mogul. So I've heard that these books are so good. They're full of detail. They're very set in LA. They're kind of classic noir detective. So I am looking forward to reading this. I've had it on my shelf for, I don't know, I bought it at the used bookstore at least 2 years ago because it moved into this house with us, so I'm gonna finally read it this month. And it's also like a fast-paced mystery is the kind of thing that I'm going to be able to focus on this month, because there will be a lot of gardening to do, and we have a week of family visiting from out of town, plus my in-laws are moving into town, so I don't know that I'm going to get a lot of reading done. So I think between this and this super angsty anxiety book and the Woman in the Library mystery, that might be all I get to. But there are 3 more books I want to read that my library has that I've requested, and I don't know how long they'll take to get me. So the first one is Pachinko. This has been on my list forever to read. It is a story of a girl in Korea who gets pregnant and decides to go against her father and marry someone who I think takes her to Japan, and it's like this generations long story of this family, and everything I've heard is that it's beautiful historical fiction, which I don't usually read, and that it is so interesting, and there's a new television show about it, and I want to read the book before I check out the television show. However, I don't know where I am on the list in my library, so it might be a while before I get to Pachinko, and my used bookstore doesn't have a copy. So next that I'm on the wait list for is The Cartagrophers by Peng, who's a Taiwanese author. The book was recommended on What Should I Read Next, and I had seen it around, but I wasn't sure based on the cover like what it was about. But I think it's actually about like archaeology mystery, maybe like a national treasure sort of storyline, but extremely well written. And so it follows a woman who is a trained cartographer, and she asks her dad about a map that seems like a really simple basic map you could buy at a gas station, and he gets so upset that she's asking about it that she won't leave it be that he gets her fired from where they work together. He's also a cartographer, and then when he turns up dead, she has to figure out what happened with the map. That's all I know about it, and that is basically a mystery. I don't know if it's cozy, I don't know if it's bloody, but I'm in. I think I'm like 5th in line at my library, so it might be a while before it comes in for me. And then the last book I'm on hold for my library is actually a middle grade fiction. I read maybe one of these a year, and this is by Hannah Allkaf, and it's Queen of the Tiles, and is about a teen girl who competes in Scrabble competitions, and I think her best friend dies, and so she's competing for her best friend, or she's trying to figure out what happened to her best friend. I'm not sure. It might be like a very mild mystery, but I've heard such good things about it. This sounds so good. My husband's grandmother and her family, so her kids and grandkids, used to always play Scrabble together on Sunday afternoons, and my husband and I would go over every other weekend when we were dating. I'm not competitive about sports at all, but I'm pretty competitive about Scrabble. My only bragging rights I ever have about any competition ever is that I beat Jay's grandmother, who was an English teacher for decades and one of the smartest people I know. And also playing with us was her daughter, Jay's aunt, who is the editor of the local newspaper. And so the fact that I beat both of them just, was everything. So in my research of books that feature older women characters for the Asian Readathon, I found one book that for sure the woman is older, and my library doesn't have it, so I've requested that they buy it. And that is The Old Woman and the Knife. And it's actually about a 65-year-old former assassin who gets wrapped up in some trouble. And it's just recently been translated into English. It was just released in March, which might be why my library doesn't have it yet. I'm gonna keep my eye out for The Woman and the Knife, and I'm adding it to my list of books I really want to read this year. So that is it for my May Asian Readathon recommendations and TBR. Let me know in the comments below, especially if you have a book written by an Asian author that features a woman over the age of 40, none of this over 30, so she's old business, okay? If you are looking to read more diversely, you might like watching my video that I made in February featuring all Black authors. You can watch that right here, and be sure you've subscribed so you don't miss the follow-up where I tell you what I thought about all these books. Thanks, and have a great day. Now I'm worried I don't remember it right.